and welcome back to the JOANN Stitch Along with yarnspirations.com. I'm Marley Bird and I will be your instructor as we knit up this Chevron, Entrelac, and knit blanket. This is a fun knit blanket, and so far we have learned a lot of new things, and in this video we are going to learn one of my favorite techniques, entrelac knitting. Now, it's not just basic entrelac knitting because we're going to build these entrelac triangles and rectangles on the fabric we've already created. So it's a little bit different than just jumping into an entrelac pattern, but with my help, you will have no trouble along the way. This is a free pattern, and I've put a link in the video description box right down there below. Simply click that link and it will take you to where you can get the instructions for this pattern. Either follow along with me in this video, or you can binge knit this entire project along the way without my help and have a wonderful blanket when you're all done. Whichever way you choose to do it is perfectly fine. Just make sure you share with us on social media. Use hashtag MarleyBird or hashtag YarnSpirations so that we can see your beautiful blanket and smash your like button. All right, let's go ahead and grab your homework you've completed after videos 1 and 2, and we can jump into video 3. By this point in your project, it looks a little bit like this. It's obviously wider than mine, as mine is only 2 repeats and yours is 9. But in the last video, we completed this really lovely loop fringe. We also did that row of bobble stitches, and then we continued on and we had some more loop fringe. We finished off with a section of stockinette stitch, of the chevron stitch that we've been working, and garter stitch. And so this is all you should have completed after the last video. It is on top of these chevron points up here that we are going to build entrelac triangles and rectangles. For those of you who don't know much about entrelac knitting, it's essentially knitting blocks and triangles on the bias, and it gives the look of a woven fabric. If you look down here at the little square on the pattern, you can see that we have all of these rectangles, and out here on the side there are some triangles, and it looks like this strip of fabric here, it's like goes over and under, or right here it goes under the green and back out to the pink. Like, it just looks really cool, but you work it back and forth just like this. So we work these stitches first, and then we'll work these stitches. Sometimes you will call those blocks or tiers. So you'll work a tier of rectangles and triangles. In this particular pattern, they call it a strip. So we're going to work strips of rectangles and triangles. The biggest piece of advice I can give you is make sure you have the pattern next to you, because we will be working with the pattern very closely. The other piece of advice is don't overthink what you're doing. Simply do what the pattern is telling you to do and it will work out. Sometimes when people attempt entrelac knitting, they try and overthink it. They're like, but wait, that's not what you're supposed to do in knitting, but it really is what you're supposed to do in entrelac. So it just kind of seems a little counterintuitive sometimes. But when it tells you to purl two together, purl two together. When it tells you to knit two together, knit two together. Do all the things it tells you to do, it being the pattern, and it will turn out perfectly. It being the blanket. All right, so with my help, I'm going to go ahead and let's get started with row 1 of the entrelac. And we can see here that row 1 is just a repeat of the right side row we have been working along all the time. So I'm going to go ahead and work that. And it's when we get to the wrong side that things get a little bit interesting with our left side triangle. So let's go ahead with my right side facing me. I will go ahead and complete this right side row just like I've been doing all along when I've been working the basic chevron pattern stitch here. So I will do my slip as if to knit, my slip as if to knit those two together, knit 8, knit front and back, knit front and back, knit 8, and then knit 2 together, and then I'll slip my marker. And repeat that for the next 22 stitches until I get to the end of my blanket, or for my little swatch here, I just get to the end of this row. All right, so I finished the end of that first row. So this is where we turn our work, and we are going to begin. This would be row 1 of the left side triangle. This first strip we complete in the entrelac knitting section is not repeated for the rest of the section. This essentially allows us to set up the entrelac base. So let's go ahead and begin. We start off with the left side triangle. So we will begin with a knit 1 and then turn our work. So we're going to turn our work and then we knit front and back. So I'll knit front and back. We know how to do that. We've been doing that all along. And then turn our work. Okay, so now we're going to, what's here? We said we have knit 1. So I will knit 1 and then I will purl 2 together. So this purl 2 together will be this stitch and the next stitch on my row. So it's essentially like closing the gap. Okay, so now I turn my work. I will knit 1. I will make 1. So that's where we're gonna grab that bar right there. Remember grabbing that bar, and we want to knit it through the back leg of the bar, and then we knit 1 more. So we have 3 stitches. Turn our work. Make sure my yarn is in back. I'm going to knit 1. I will purl 1 and then purl 2 together. So I still have 3 stitches. When I turn my work, I'm going to be working an increase here. So I've turned my work. I will knit 2. I will do a make 1. So I pick up that bar, work my make 1, and then knit 1. Turn my work. Knit 1. Purl 2. And purl 2 together. Now this is a lot of hassle sort of turning the work back and forth, but I feel like it's very important as you're working these triangles to do that. One thing you can do is, just like what I've done, is I folded up my swatch here so that way the bulk of the fabric I've already created is sort of out of the way. So as I turn, I just kind of have to flip it, and I keep everything folded up. So you just kind of maintain control of your turn, and it becomes a little bit easier. And this row, this strip might take a little bit longer than the rest of the entrelac piece, but that's just because we're getting it all really set up, okay? So here we go. For this one, I will knit 3, make 1, oops, make sure you don't split your yarn, and then knit 1, turn my work. If you haven't picked this up yet, you essentially, when you turn, you're on your right side, you knit to where it's just before the last stitch, and then you do your make 1, then you knit one and turn. And when you're on your wrong side, you knit the start, so you knit the first stitch, and then you purl to the last stitch that you just created, essentially purl to your gap. So there's my gap, and I'm going to do a purl two together, and that closes the gap, and turn. And I keep repeating this back and forth until I get my 11 stitches. As I turn my work, I am on row 21 of this left side triangle. So I will do my knit one, purl 9, and purl 2 together. And then I do not turn. This completes one triangle of the entrelac. So just like when I have my stitch markers down here, I'm going to go ahead and grab another stitch marker and just place it right there so that I know those stitches are off limits to me. This is very similar to what we did in the very first video when we created triangles, and I want to make sure that I don't use those stitches anymore. So I'm placing that marker there to kind of be like, okay, those are off limits until it's time to work into them. So on the next set of stitches here, I'm going to be working a right leaning setup rectangle. And what will happen here is I'm going to knit these 11 stitches down, and then as I do a 2 together, I'm going to join into 11 stitches over here on this side, and it's going to bring the stitches together. Once again, I want to make sure you have that pattern with you, and let's follow along together. So we start off here with a purl 11. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to remove that marker. It says slip the last stitch purled to the left needle. So I just purled it. So I'm going to slip it over to the left needle. And now it says to purl 2 together. So I'm going to purl that stitch I just slipped over, and the next stitch I'm going to purl it together. Okay? And then I'm going to turn. I know this is completely different. Just trust me on this, okay? This is what we're going to do. Now, on this row, so on all of our right side rows, we are just going to knit 11. So we will just knit 11 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And we knit 11 stitches because there's nothing over here for us to connect to at this point. We want to connect the rectangle we're creating to this section of stitches right here. And we do that on the wrong side. So I will turn my work. And so on this wrong side, so on rows 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, 13, so on and so forth, all these wrong sides, we slip the first stitch. We will purl 9. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then we purl 2 together. And this purl 2 together is going to close that gap. So it's going to be this last stitch here of our 11 and the next stitch over on our blanket. And so we purl 2 together and it closes that gap. And we turn. So the convenient thing here is we don't really have to look at our pattern much anymore because we know that when we turn, we simply knit 11, or you can think of it as you're knitting over to where your marker is because that's your stop marker, right? That's where it's like, don't go any further. So we're going to get over to our marker, which means we're knitting 11. And then when we turn and we do the wrong side, what we're essentially doing here, let's think through this. We're slipping this first stitch, And we're going to purl all of these down to the last stitch here before the gap. And then we're going to purl two together to close those two stitches at the gap. All right. And we're going to do this for a total of 21 rows. So I'll slip, I'll purl 9, and then I'm going to purl two together, and it just closes this gap. So even if I hadn't counted my stitches as I was purling them, I know that when I get to that gap, it's time to purl them together and turn. Just remember, every time you're on the wrong side, it joins. See how we're joining together that section right there to those stitches on our blanket. So we're going to get a nice rectangle right here. I am on my last row of my right leaning setup rectangle. And I know that because I've been counting, but I want to give you a little tip down here. When I reach down here, I'm going to show you something that you can do if you have lost track of how many rows you've done. So I know that if I count all of my rows here, I have completed my 21 rows, okay, my 21st stitch rows. And one thing you can do is if you've kept your marker down here in between your chevron points, you know how we've been keeping a marker and then you keep a marker and you have several markers across yours. I only had one on mine. But from your marker to the top of your chevron, if you count 11 stitches, so 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11, you want 11 stitches remaining, because remember, you only have 22 stitches on your repeat, and we are using up those first 11 stitches with our rectangle here. So you will use up 11 and you will have 11 stitches remaining. So if you're ever in doubt of, have I done enough? Am I done with my rows? Go to your marker and count up 11. And if you have any stitches past your 11th point, then you still have a few more rows to do. If not, then you're done. Hopefully that makes sense. All right, so I just finished my 21st row, which means it's the wrong side, and I am not going to turn, okay? But I wanted you to see what I have here. So I have a triangle right out here on the outside. I have a rectangle now that is created. And of course, we're looking at the wrong side. If we were looking at the right side, it looks like so. But at this point, you would continue and you would repeat this rectangle. So you have 7 more rectangles to complete on your blanket. On my little swatch, I'm already to the edge. So this is where I would start the right side triangle. So over here, I need to create a triangle. So I did a triangle here. Now I'm going to do a triangle over here. So I'm just going to follow along with the instructions once again. So make sure you do have those instructions out there in front of you, and let's follow along together. We are going to purl 11. Then we turn our work. Second row, we're going to knit 11. So knit 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I forgot to put my marker here, so I'm going to go ahead and put my marker there just because I like markers. I like to have stopping points. So that was my knit 11. So I'm on row 3 of the right side triangle. I will slip 1, purl 8, and then knit these two together. So I have one less stitch than what I had to start. Then I turn my work and I will knit 10. And I will repeat this all the way down until I have just one stitch left. So here we go. Every time we're on the right side, we just simply knit our stitches on the right side. Just like we were over here, we just knit 11. Every time we're over here, we're just going to knit however many stitches we have left. And it will always be one fewer stitch than the previous time we were on the right side. And that's because on the wrong side, when we turn our work, we slip the first stitch and you purl down to the last 2 stitches. So this time it would be purl 7. And then when you get to the last 2 stitches, and knit them together. All right, this is going to give us our right side triangle. It's pretty easy. If you don't overthink it and just work through this process, it will all come together and you'll be left with 1 stitch on your needle. When you're all done with your triangle, it looks just like so. And you have 1 stitch remaining on your needle, and we've turned our work. So we have the right side facing us. But let's take a peek at what we have so far. So we have a triangle over here. This is our left side triangle. We have a right leaning setup rectangle. See how it looks like that fabric leans to the right? And then we have a right side triangle. And that's not meaning like right side, wrong side, just mean like right edge triangle. Can you see? All right, so that's going to give us a nice, clean, straight edge going up the blanket. That's why it's important to work these triangles and not just the rectangles. All right. Strip 2 and strip 3 are the ones that you will repeat for this part of the blanket. So let's go ahead and dive into strip number 2. Here we are on the right side of our fabric. We have 1 stitch remaining. Let me get my yarn out here. And we will start off with the left leaning rectangle. Now for the left leaning rectangle, what we have to do, we have to pick up and knit 11 stitches along this edge of the triangle. As we do that, we will then continue on and join with a knit or the SSK to these stitches right here of this triangle. And it will make sense. Very similar to how we had stitches here and we joined these stitches. It's going to be very same. We have to pick up stitches and they'll join to these stitches. So let's go ahead and start off with picking up our stitches. So it says we have to pick up and knit 11 stitches along the edge of this triangle. Let me bring you in a little bit closer. All right, remember we have this 1 stitch remaining. So this 1 stitch we want to transfer over to our right hand needle, and this will count as stitch number 1 of our 11 stitches here. And that's only for this first rectangle, okay? Now we want to pick up all of our stitches along this edge. And just like when we picked up our stitches after we did our triangles at the start of the blanket, I'm going to use my left hand needle and I'm going to go underneath both legs of the slipped stitch that we did. And then I'm going to knit it. So last time we purled, but this time we're picking up and we're knitting. All right. So now I have 2. Remember, we're going to count that as 1. So I can come down to the next, put my left hand needle in. It just helps with being able to identify where the stitch is, and then I'm going to knit. So there's 3. And you do this all the way down until you get right down to the edge. If you don't want to use the needle, you don't have to. You can just go right in, yarn over and scoop up. I just know that the needle helps so many people, so I often will teach it that way. And as you come up close to the end down here, I will often go back and count. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11. So I have 11 stitches. This is where my marker is. I'll go ahead and remove my marker. All right, so I picked up all of those, picked up and knit the 11 stitches, including this one. Now I'm going to slip the last picked up stitch onto my left hand needle. All right, and I'm going to SSK. So I'm going to slip as if to knit, slip as if to knit, and then knit those together. And that works my decrease. So this will start to make these stitches here that I just worked join up to these here. Okay, so every time I get over here to this edge, I'm going to be joining with that SSK. All right, so at this point I would turn my work. On the wrong side, I'd purl all 11 stitches. Now, because I'm not doing any sort of a decrease and I don't have to really overthink about what the stitches are doing, if I wanted to knit backwards, just like I did at the start, I could do that without turning. It's a little bit easier on these rectangles, I think, to do so. So I will do that on the next one. So here we go. I am on the right side. So what I'm going to end up doing here is I will slip my first stitch. I will knit all the way down to the last stitch of these 11 here, and I will do an SSK to connect these two stitches. So I don't really have to overthink this. I know exactly what's going to happen. So I slip one, essentially knit down to one stitch before the gap. Here's my gap. So I'm going to slip, slip, and knit them together and turn. But I'm not going to turn. I'm going to go ahead and just knit backwards so I don't have to turn my work. And if you remember, you will put your needle in through the back leg, yarn over top of your needle and out. I went over this in the week 1 video, so I don't want to go over it too much again because I feel like we went over it quite a bit in week 1. All right, and then here we are again. So we're on the next row, so I slip, I will knit down to the gap, and then close the gap with the SSK. Slip as if to knit, slip as if to knit. There you have it. All right, so I'm going to keep going this way. You go ahead and keep going on yours as well. Once you have used up all of the stitches from the rectangle that we're doing the SSK to, that's where we will be ready to go on to the next triangle. I am coming up to my last SSK for this left-leaning rectangle. You can see, I know it's the last one because I've used up all of my stitches from the previous rectangle. And as I set this down, you should be able to see here. So here is the right side triangle that we picked up and knit stitches on. And then as we came over to this edge, we joined with an SSK over here to those live stitches. And so now we have a nice pattern fabric here. So if I had it up like straight up and down, this is where we are. It looks pretty cool. So what you can see here is we have another section right here that we need to fill in. So we're going to do this exact same rectangle again right here. So we will pick up and knit 11 stitches and then join them to these stitches right over here. But remember, over here, when we started down here, we had that one stitch remaining, so that counted as one of our 11. Over here, we do not have that. So these 11 stitches are done. So you could take your marker and have that be your like stop sign. You're not going to use those anymore. So we're going to pick up and knit 11 stitches and then join them over here. So we're going to do this exact same rectangle right over here. Let me get you started here. So I'm going to put these all into place. And right here along this edge, I can go ahead and I like to, when I'm working on the right side, I could just put my right hand needle in to grab the 2 strands, yarn over and just pull it through. But if that is too tricky for you, you can stick your left hand needle in and then work the knit stitch just to help you get those or get that loop through pretty easily. All right, so the marker also helps be able to know how many stitches you've counted or picked up and knit. So there's 3, there's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I don't like that one. 10, and then I'm gonna do one more right here. So I think that's That'll put me down. There's my 11. And remember what we have to do? We slip that 11th one over. Okay, so it's the last one. And now we're going to work an SSK. So I slip it as if to knit, slip as if to knit, work my SSK, and turn my work. So I'll just go ahead and turn my work for this first one so you can see. And it's just like before. You will purl 11. Okay, I'm to my marker, so I ignore it completely. Turn my work, and I will slip my first one. I will knit all the way down to my gap, and then I will work the SSK to close the gap. So let's go ahead and finish this rectangle. And as far as the second strip goes, this is all you're going to do. You create a total of 9 rectangles all the way down this row. Once you've completed your 9th rectangle, that's when we will carry on and begin the third strip, which actually is very similar to the first strip in that we're going to start off with a triangle, and then we will do rectangles all the way over until we get to the last triangle. All right, so let's go ahead. Let me get done with strip number 2, and we'll jump into strip number 3. I am coming up to my last SSK on my last rectangle from strip number 2. So I'll do my SSK, and let's take a look at what we have. You can see, it goes to the cord, my fabric. These are the 2 triangles we started with. Here's the rectangle. Here's the first rectangle we did, and here's the second one. Now, when we get to strip number 3, again, we're going to build a triangle here. We'll do a rectangle here. We'll have a triangle here. So it's very similar to this, but it's a little bit different because we had stitches here to work with, where on number 3, we have to pick up and purl stitches to work with. So you essentially know what to do with strip number 3, but let's go ahead and get started and do this together. We begin with the left triangle, which is exactly like we did last time. So we will start off with a knit 1, and then we will turn and do a knit front and back. And then turn. We'll do a knit 1. Remember, this is where we close the gap with our purl 2 together. Then I'll turn, and if you remember, this is where we would do a knit 1. We do a make 1, so I will pick up that bar, make sure that I knit it through the back leg, and then knit 1. And then turn my work. So where I knit 1, and then I will purl 1, and then I'll purl 2 together. And I continue on just like this. Once you've completed your triangle, it looks a little something like that. And it's now that we will carry on, and we are going to pick up and purl stitches along this edge right here, and then we will do the purl 2 together to these stitches right here of that rectangle from before. So this is very similar to what we did over here on the first right leaning setup rectangle we did. We're doing basically the same thing, only we're starting off right here with picking up and purling stitches. Everything else is going to be the same, okay? So I'm going to go ahead, remove my marker, and put it over here. And let's do our pick up and purl. Just to remind you, because that was a little while ago. Remember, we have these slip stitches here, and if you want to, you can go in without your without the left-hand needle. I find it easier with the left-hand needle when I'm going to do purls. So I'm going to go and pick up, stitch right here, and purl. So there's 1, and I pick up both loops. It's 2. And just keep going until you get all 11. Once you get 11, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11, you will go ahead, you will slip that last one that you did back over to your left hand needle and then purl 2 together with that next stitch. Okay, now you turn your work and you will knit 11. So if you have that marker in place, you're going to knit to the marker. But that's it, guys. That's how easy this is. You've already done everything else beyond that little bit of instructions. So let's go ahead and complete this rectangle, and then we'll get to the right side triangle once again and go over that one more time just to make sure we're all on the same page. But here we will slip one, purl over essentially to my gap, and then close my gap with the purl 2 together. This is the last purl 2 together of my right leaning rectangle, because remember I only have the one. And now I'm ready to carry on and do my right side triangle. And just like the rectangle where I had to pick up stitches, I have to pick up and purl stitches right here that I will then work my triangle. So just like before, I will go ahead, I'll place my marker there just because it makes it easier to count. And I will pick up and purl 11 stitches along this edge. The biggest thing you want to make sure of is that your 11th stitch is picked up all the way down here at the bottom edge, okay? So I'm going to go through both loops. Let's go through both and purl. So I have 11 stitches on my needle. Once you have picked up and purled those 11 stitches, you will turn your work and you will follow the instructions for the right side triangle, starting with row 2. So it's at this point that I will carry on and I will knit 11. It's always helpful to have that marker there. Then I turn my work and I carry on. So this would be row 3. And what we are going to do is we are going to slip a stitch. We will purl 8 all the way down to these last 2 stitches, and we will knit those 2 stitches together, just like we did the last time we did the right side triangle. By working that knit 2 together at that edge, we're going to keep those in garter stitch, which is exactly the way the edge of our left side triangle is. So here we go. I start off here. I will slip 1, purl 8, and then knit these 2 together. Turn my work. I now have 1 fewer stitch than I had before. I will knit these 10 stitches. Turn my work. Slip the first stitch, and I will purl down to the last 2 stitches. Get to these 2 stitches and knit them together. Now, if you wanted to purl them together, you could. It would just have a little bit of a different finish at the edge. But we are going to work our knit two together, turn our work, and now we knit back. So we always will just knit the stitches we have on our needle for this triangle every time we're on the right side. And when we are on the wrong side, you work down to 2 stitches before the edge and you work the knit two together. So we slip one, purl down to the last 2 stitches, and then knit two together. You will repeat doing this all the way down until you have 1 stitch remaining. I am to my last knit two together. So I turn my work, I'll do my knit two together, and that will leave me with 1 stitch on my needle, and I will turn my work, and my rectangle and my triangles will be complete. So let's take a peek here, and you can see I have my left triangle, my rectangle, my right triangle. Let me get it on here. So what you need to repeat now is strip number 2 and strip number 3 one more time. After you have done that, we have one last step of instructions to do before we move on to video number 4. So let's go ahead and take a look at those. The last thing we have to do to prepare our work for the next section of the stitch along is get all of these stitches picked up once again so that they are on our needle without any of these gaps that we've created with our entrelac. And we will do that very easily. We're going to pick up stitches along the triangle, knit our stitches that are available to us on our rectangles, and pick up stitches along the edge of the rectangle that is not live with stitches. And you will do that all the way across and then finish up knitting those last 11 stitches here. So you start off here, move that stitch over to your right hand needle, and that will count as stitch number 1. And then we will just go in and pick up and knit stitches all the way down. So this one we have to pick up 11. So now I have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm going to do one right here. So 11. So I have 11 stitches that I picked up and knit. Now I will go ahead and I knit across these 11 stitches. Can you see here? So those 11 stitches are now ready to go for when we move into the next part of our chevron. So I will go ahead and knit across these 11. I will go ahead, I'm going to remove my markers. I'll add them again in the next section. Right here, I'm going to pick up and knit 11 again here. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm just going to pick up one more right here just to make sure it's down at the edge. So that's what I want. There's 11. And then I am already to my triangle, but you would continue on repeating that, knitting 11, picking up 11, picking up and knitting 11 until you get to your last triangle, and then you will knit your last 11 stitches on the triangle. All right, you see that? Now we have to turn our work and we will knit the next row. So we're back to our original stitch count where we have 198 stitches if you're following along with the blanket. So I simply just knit all of these stitches and everything should be back to normal. So if I wanted to, I could count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, oops, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. And I could add my stitch marker right there. Remember, we had 22, and then I'll have 22 over here. So if I wanted to put my stitch markers between every 22nd stitch, 22nd and 23rd stitch, or you know what I mean, you could do that just to kind of have those back in place to where they were before you started the entrelac. But right here, we're just knitting some stitches. Pretty easy row. And hopefully the entrelac itself, I mean, it's a little bit tricky to get started with, but the construction, the essence of the actual working the stitches is pretty easy. It's just knit some purls and then some purl two togethers, some SSKs, some knit two togethers, pretty basic stuff going on. But the resulting fabric is pretty darn neat. All right, so that would be our knit row. And this is where we would pause and wait for the next set of instructions. So you will not cast off, bind off, or anything. But you can see here, we have all of our stitches. Look how cool this looks. So obviously I didn't repeat my section 2 and 3. I just went right into the finishing part. But we have our triangles, we have our rectangles, and we have our triangles. Everything looks fabulous. And we are ready to start some chevrons for the next section. And we are on our way. I mean, the majority of what you need to learn for this blanket, you have already learned. So congratulations to you. It's got to feel pretty good. And once you finish this section, your blanket's going to look really great. You're going to be like, oh, I can't wait to finish this. It's some exciting stuff. I really hope you're enjoying this JOANN Stitch Along with Yarnspirations and Marley Bird. I know that I'm having a great time knitting up my little swatch. The designer did such a great job combining all of these stitch patterns together, and I cannot lie to you, entrelac is one of my absolute favorite techniques. I even wrote a book on it with Leisure Arts, and it's just one of my all-time favorites. So I'm glad I got a chance to teach it to you today. Hopefully you enjoyed it as much as I did. All right, go ahead, finish your homework, and be ready to join me for week 4, and we will be cruising right along. I'm Marley Bird. I'll talk to you again real soon. Bye. Thanks so much for joining me on the Marley Bird YouTube channel. If you liked what you saw, don't forget to hit subscribe. I've put a link right over there, or you can watch a couple of the videos I've already selected for you right down there. If you want to follow me on social media, I've put my links right over there. You can have all Marley all the time. Bye guys.